The story opens inside a prison where a serial killer named Edgar is just hours away from execution. Before he dies, he makes one final request. He wants to see the detective who arrested him, just to say goodbye. That detective is John, a police officer known for being honest and impossible to bribe. As John sits calmly across from Edgar, listening to him ramble, something strange happens. Edgar stretches out his hand for one last handshake. Then he begins muttering in a language no one recognizes. It sounds ancient, unsettling. As John prepares to leave, Edgar suddenly asks him a cryptic question about a gap between two names, Lyons and Spakowski. John brushes it off as nonsense and walks away. Execution time arrives. Police officers and the victims' families gather to witness Edgar's death. Strangely, Edgar shows no fear at all. He seems completely at peace. The moment he dies, something unseen slips out of his body. Whatever it is, it does not disappear. It moves on, searching for a new host, and settles inside a young police officer nearby. What left that execution chamber was not a man, but something far worse. This is Fallen. After the execution, John meets up with his two closest colleagues, Lou and Jonesy. Lou is new to the team and curious about John's reputation. In a department where corruption runs deep, John has somehow managed to stay clean. Lou cannot help but wonder how he does it. Outside of work, John lives with his younger brother Mike and Mike's young son Sam. Their parents are gone, and Mike's wife left him for another man. So John invited them to stay with him, partly to support them, partly to ease his own loneliness. Meanwhile, the young officer who was unknowingly possessed heads into a crowded area. With a simple touch, the unseen entity transfers from one body to another. Eventually, it lands inside a thin, unemployed man who lives a quiet, isolated life. The next morning, that man is seen calmly eating cereal in someone else's apartment. There is no guilt on his face, even though the apartment belongs to a person he has just killed in the bathroom. John and his team arrive at the scene after a neighbor reports something suspicious. They discover the victim was killed with a needle. The killer even took time to have breakfast before leaving. But what truly shocks John is what is written on the wall. Two names, Lyons and Spakowski, the same names Edgar mentioned before his execution. Back at the station, John cannot stop thinking about those names. Lou suddenly remembers seeing them on an old award plaque stored in the warehouse. Lyons and Spakowski were police officers back in the 1960s, but between their names there is an empty space, a missing name. That detail hits John hard. He recalls Edgar's question about the gap between Lyons and Spakowski. Maybe the gap refers to that missing name. Using the limited internet resources available at the time, John begins digging through old records. Eventually, he uncovers a name of Robert Milano that might be the key to everything. The next day at the office, John digs deeper into the past of Robert Milano. He learns that Robert died after committing something unthinkable. Not long after, John finds out that Robert had a daughter named Greta Milano. Without wasting time, he heads straight to her address. At first, Greta refuses to talk, but eventually she opens up about her father. She says Robert was once known as a good and honest cop. Everything changed after he handled a serial killer case and successfully captured the suspect. From that moment on, his behavior shifted. He became distant, different. Later, he was found dead in a remote cabin in the mountains. After leaving Greta's house, John returns to the station. His superior has already called in a language professor. Since this case is still tied to Edgar, they need to understand exactly what Edgar said just before his execution. The professor reviews the recording and confirms that Edgar was reciting a passage from a holy text spoken in Syrian Aramaic, a language more than 3,000 years old. John cannot wrap his head around it. How could a low-level criminal like Edgar possibly know such an ancient language? Determined to keep digging, John searches through Robert Milano's old case files stored in the warehouse. While going through them, he finds a map. It points to the very cabin in the mountains where Robert's body was discovered. The next morning, John drives out to the mountains. Using the map, he manages to locate the cabin. It sits in an isolated area near a lake. Inside, John discovers a hidden path leading down to a basement. There, he finds an old book and a photograph that seems connected to a mirror. Written on it is a single name, Azuzel. John rushes back to Greta, asking her what the name means. Greta explains that it is tied to religion and the supernatural, things John might struggle to believe. She warns him that if he still has family or anyone he cares about, he should stop investigating this case. Back at the station, Jonesy receives a letter from the professor. It contains the full translation of Edgar's final words. The message is chilling. If the entity cannot enter through touch, it will find another way to destroy John's life.
I can't enter you by touch. That doesn't work. I have other ways.
That night, as John returns home from work, he senses something following him. The entity has found a new host. It stays behind him, unseen but present. The next morning at the office, the entity moves again. It passes from a cat to a civilian, transferring through simple physical contact. It jumps quickly from person to person, moving through officers and administrative staff until it ends up inside Lou. Something feels off immediately. With an unfamiliar tone and behavior, Lou approaches John. Then, in an unsettling moment, the entity moves on again, shifting into another officer before John can react. John knows something is wrong. He follows the civilian outside just as the entity transfers into yet another body. Finally, to test what he suspects, John calls out the name of Azazel.
I do know who you are. Say so.
As Azazel continues jumping from one body to another in the middle of the crowd, it makes one thing clear to John. This time, he is not dealing with an ordinary criminal. This is something far beyond anything he has faced before. Determined to understand what he is up against, John returns to Greta. Now he is ready to believe everything she says. Greta finally explains the truth. Azazel is a fallen angel, cast down to earth as punishment. It survives by transferring from one body to another through touch. Its only purpose is to spread evil. The reason Azazel is so fixated on John is simple. John is an honest cop, a rare one, someone who has stayed true to his principles. When John shook Edgar's hand before the execution, Azazel tried to enter him but failed. That failure angered it. From that moment on, Azazel became determined to destroy John's life in other ways. Because Greta helped John, she also becomes a target. Azazel watches her from a distance as she walks home. It possesses a random office worker and tries to intimidate her. Greta barely manages to escape, but the terror does not stop there.
Hey, no you don't! No!
Azazel begins attacking the people closest to John. It starts with his brother, Mike. When John comes home one evening, Mike has a bruised eye, supposedly from an accidental hit by young Sam. The explanation feels off. John quickly checks on his nephew, making sure he is not possessed. Then he rushes outside toward a neighbor's child, sensing Azazel nearby. A brief chase follows. The entity jumps into a passerby who happens to have a gun in his car. John is forced into a shootout. The man is killed.
Put the gun down.
Just like before, the moment the host dies, Azazel slips away in search of another body. Only this time, the man who died was a math teacher, an innocent man. The weight of it hits John hard. He feels the guilt settling in. News spreads quickly. A police officer has shot an unarmed civilian. Even though some witnesses claim John acted in self-defense, the public sees only one thing. The victim was a teacher with a pregnant wife. An internal investigation begins. John is allowed to return home while waiting for the results. Alone in his house, the pressure starts to break him. Anxiety creeps in. Doubt follows. This is exactly what Azazel wants. The next morning, John wakes up to a horrifying sight. There is writing on the mirror. Then he sees more writing on Sam's chest. But the worst blow comes moments later. Mike is dead, killed by a cyanide injection. It becomes clear that Azazel must have possessed Sam during the night and used him to murder his own father while John slept. Soon after, the news announces a shocking update. John is officially named a suspect. Azazel has interfered again, possessing witnesses and twisting their statements on live television. Then a colleague calls from the station. Officers are already on their way to arrest him. With Mike dead under suspicious circumstances, everything points back to John. The case against him is growing fast. John knows he will not get the chance to uncover the truth from behind bars. So he makes a desperate choice. He grabs Sam and runs. At the train station, John buys a pack of cigarettes, even though he does not smoke. There is no clear reason for it, at least not yet. Then he takes Sam and heads straight to Greta's house. The only person he believes might still be able to help them. Greta reminds him once again what they are dealing with. Azazel can only survive by using a human host. It cannot exist for long without one, but that does not make it weak. Every time a host dies, Azazel simply moves on and finds another body. It has been doing this for thousands of years. When John says he plans to find a way to stop it, Greta falls silent. To her, defeating something like a Zeus cell sounds impossible. Still, John seems to have made up his mind. He leaves Sam in Greta's care, then drives off while calling Jonesy. On the phone, John admits he feels completely hopeless. He says he is heading back to the cabin in the mountains. If Jonesy wants to understand why John shot the math teacher, he tells him to come alone. Night falls. John waits inside the cabin, sitting quietly. Eventually, someone arrives. He assumes it is Jonesy, since no one else knows where he is, but instead, his police chief steps inside. Then the situation shifts. Jonesy is not alone after all. As they move to arrest John, Jonesy suddenly turns his gun on the chief and shoots him. It becomes clear that Azazel has been inside Jonesy since their phone call earlier that day. Jonesy then fires at John. A brief struggle follows and John manages to overpower him, but technically it is Azazel he is fighting. This has all been part of John's plan. He lured Azazel to a remote location on purpose. Once Jonesy is about to die, Azazel will have no nearby body to escape into except John's. Greta once explained why Azazel could not enter John before. John's integrity protected him. He was a good man who carried out his duty with a clear conscience. But that protection is gone now. After killing an innocent math teacher, even if it was in self-defense, guilt has taken root inside him. That crack in his moral armor is all Azazel needs. John understands this. That is why he bought the cigarettes. Before coming to the cabin, he coated them with cyanide taken from the same injection that killed his brother Mike. As Jonesy takes his final breath, John lights one of the poisoned cigarettes and inhales deeply. When he finishes it, Azazel enters his body, preparing to flee once again. It tries to move toward the car, searching for escape, but John's body is already failing. There is nowhere else to go. John collapses, determined to take the entity down with him in this isolated place. But fate has one last cruel twist. Beneath the cabin, unseen by anyone, there is a cat. Azazel survives, and John's sacrifice turns out to be in vain. So the moral of the story is, if a serial killer offers you a handshake and starts speaking ancient languages, just say no, wash your hands, and maybe avoid cats forever.